The lake was built back in the year 1870 for a man named Shelton Sturgis. It was known as Maple Lawn. The original home was torn down about 20 years ago, but stood where this large tan home with a black sloping roof behind Pier 7 stands today. The name Maple Lawn does remain. So the Sturgis family, including brothers Buckingham, George, and Shelton of Chicago, they were among the earliest summer residents here at the lake. They were heavily involved in the grain storage and grain elevator business, and in the year 1871, it was noted that approximately 25% of all grain stored in Chicago was held in a Sturgis facility. And then now we're going to be passing our first group of homes on the tour today. This is the Geneva Manor subdivision, founded in 1926. There's about 80 homes in the subdivision here, of which about half of them are used year-round. That's a pretty good statistic here at the lakefront, 50% of them being used year-round. About only 3 to 5% of the homes we're going to be seeing today are used 24/7, 365 days a year. For the most part, these are these people's second, third, fourth, fifth homes and so on, only used from a few days to a few months a year, as they are multi-million-dollar lakeshore homes. Before it was the group of homes, though, it was known as Linden Lodge. It was the estate of Levi Z. Leiter, beginning in the late 1800s. Mr. Leiter, in the early years, met a man named Marshall Field, and together they were the ones that started Marshall Field's department store in the city of Chicago, a mainstay for many years. That's how Mr. Leiter made his fortunes and was able to build his lakefront home here. You'll notice that handsome Victorian boathouse on the shoreline. That's one of the few remaining structures of an old estate known as Snug Harbor. Snug Harbor dates back to 1888. It was the estate of George and Mary Sturgis, the same people that donated Library Park back in the city of Lake Geneva. Their home stood in the open area left of the boathouse. It was 5 stories tall facing the lake and had enough bedrooms for themselves and their 9 children. But then ever since 1947 and until now, it's been known as Covenant Harbor Bible Camp, owned and operated by the Evangelical Covenant Churches of America. Today, between the Bible Camp and the Geneva Bay Center, they host many different programs for youth, family, and senior hostel group programs throughout the entire year. We're starting to see a couple of groups starting to use the accommodations there at the lakefront, but mostly they do run summer camps is what's more popular, mostly run from Memorial Day to Labor Day here at the lakefront. And then as we're getting into these next group of homes here, this is our next subdivision on the lake, known as the Geneva Bay Estates. It's built on the former site of a large and beautiful estate known as the Butternuts. The Butternuts began construction back in 1874 for Nathaniel Kellogg Fairbank. He was president of the N.K. Fairbank Company, which at that time was Chicago's leading manufacturer of soap products. His homes look at roughly the same area as the first 3 homes in the subdivision we are passing right now. But shortly after its completion in 1875, sadly it did burn to the ground. However, firemen, family, and servants were able to save some of the handsome wood trim, ornately carved mantelpieces, and even the blueprints to the original structure off that front desk. So undeterred, Mr. Fairbank had work begin that following Monday morning to rebuild his home from its original plans. 20 years later, in 1895, he added a 5-hole golf course to his estate grounds here. It was here on Mr. Fairbank's golf course that many of the millionaires living at the lake were introduced to the relatively new game of golf. Later that year, they decided that 5 holes was not enough. They wanted to transform it into 18 as what we know it as today. They didn't have enough land here, so they went over to the South Shore and established the Lake Geneva Country Club. We'll see that in about half an hour on our tour. Now, everyone always asks about property value here, which we will talk about a good amount throughout our tour today. Behind Pier 39 there, you're going to notice that more modestly sized white home with a black sloping roof that's going to be coming into view. That home was sold just about 2 summers ago here at the lakefront for about $7.5 million. Now, when I started here 7 years ago, that home behind Pier 39 looked the exact same as the one behind Pier 40 to the left of it, the much more bigger white home with the black sloping roof. That home was only finished here at the lakefront about 4 summers ago. So it gives you an idea of what a lot of people do. They like to buy older homes, knock them down, and rebuild to their dream house, as what we see a prime example of right here. Right after that, on the shoreline, you can see one of the 7 pier companies on the lake. That's the ours, Gage Marine, but there are 7 on the lake whose business is the installation and removal of all of about the 1,400 piers out here on the waterfront. They do have to come out of the water every fall and are put back in every spring to be able to use. The lake does freeze over during the winter time. That's the reason they have to take them out, or else they would be damaged by the strong winter ice. Now, until now, I've had to ask you all to use your imaginations a little bit to picture what some of these homes and estates would have looked like. But for the next few miles of shoreline, many of the homes remain relatively intact and unchanged from when they were built during the Newport of the West period. Beginning with Blacktop, that large white home with the red roof and chimneys, that was built back in 1881 for John T. Lester. He was a prominent member of the Chicago Board of Trade. It's good to note that most of these older homes in the North Shore were built with those large screened-in verandas facing the lakeside. That's because when they were built, of course, there was no such thing as air conditioning. So in the hot summers, they'd open up the windows and take advantage of that lake breeze like we're feeling right now. Now, just past them, all the next 6 properties and about the next mile of shoreline are especially interesting, as they are currently or were all at one point part of the Wrigley estate. Under William and P.K. Wrigley, the family amassed vast business, sports, and real estate holdings. At the time of P.K.'s passing in 1977, the family's interests included the Chicago Cubs, Wrigley Field, the Wrigley Building in downtown Chicago, and real estate holdings all around the world. The first home is this large white home with the green trim and brick patio. That's known as North Woodside. It was built in 1876 for General Henry Strong, president of the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad. 50 years later, in 1926, it was sold to Olaf Nelson T. Vander. He was a famous inventor during his heyday. His most famous invention was the sanitary milk bottle cap. All that was a small cardboard disc stamped top of those old glass milk bottles. That seemed to be simple invention, enabled Mr. T. Vander to retire here at the lakefront at the ripe old age of 26 as a multi-millionaire. The home we're passing now is known as Shoreside. Looks about as old as North Woodside does, but Shoreside was only completed about 5 years ago here at the lakefront. Next door to them, the brown and brick building is known as Hillcroft. It began in the 1880s as a small hunting lodge for the architect Henry Lord Gay, originally named Gay Lynn. From 1927 until 1966, Hillcroft, as it was renamed, served as P.K. Wrigley's summer residence, later as his guest house. Now, the Wrigleys eventually let go of Hillcroft in 1981. It was rebuilt to what we see it as today in 1984. And this home recently sold in 2018 for about $11.25 million. Next door to them, the green one, just beyond the shoreline there, that's known as Green Gables. It was P.K. Wrigley's main residence at the time of his passing back in 1977. When it was built here at the lakefront, it was considered state-of-the-art, as everything from the flagpole to the draperies were all controlled electronically. Now, as we're passing the home, if you look to the left side, a little bit back past the home, there's that smaller building with the glass roof. That's not a guest house or anything like that. That's just where they have their indoor Olympic-sized swimming pool on the property grounds there. Guess there wasn't anywhere else to swim out here on the beautiful lake. And we're now going to be passing what many people consider a more modestly sized single-family home. That's actually not the case at all. This is only the Wrigley Pool and Spa House here on the lakefront. And then in the basement there is a 6-lane bowling alley. Beyond that, on the shoreline, the barn-shaped building is the Wrigley Boat House, where they house all those fun summer toys during the wintertime. Originally part of the Green Gables estate, and past that is the newest home on the Wrigley property, sprawling in length. It's known as Lakewood. It was built about 10 years ago in 2014. Just past them with the people walking in front of it is Deadwood, that brown building. It used to be able to house 4 steam yachts when constructed, but today it can only house 3. That left one was bought by a single family and converted into a single family home. Now it does briefly interrupt the Wrigley estate at the shoreline, but don't worry, it continues a half-mile back to the road with the Wrigley Arabian Horse Farm, also their polo field as well. At the Brown Pier, just past them, you're going to see that large lake yacht. That is the 70-foot Ada E, nicknamed the Ada E in honor of P.K. Wrigley's mother, Ada Elizabeth. It was built back in 1911 and brought here by rail car from New York, and was at that time the only gasoline-powered yacht on the lake. And then as we round this small point of land here, we're going to get a good view of Witchwood, the final home on the Wrigley property. It was built back in 1902 for Charles L. Hutchinson. He was a trustee and treasurer of the University of Chicago and founder of the Art Institute in Chicago as well. He and his wife Frances built a rambling 3-story home with a definite English country influence. And then in 1957, it was sold to a different man. He had those top 2 floors removed and modernized it down to the ranch style we see today. Now, Mr. Wrigley, he wasn't very fond of this guy and what he was doing to the property, so one day he decided to grab his checkbook, march along the lakefront, knock on the front door, wrote him a price he could not refuse, and that home is still owned by extended members of the Wrigley family today. Somewhere in this tree line here does end the Wrigley Mile, originally taking up all of that land that we saw at one point. Next up here, after the tree line here, you're going to notice a very large plot of land with no homes there, a lot of dirt piled up there. If you hear about 2 summers ago, you would have seen a large cream-colored home with an orange-style roof built in 1906 for the Swift family of the Swift Meat Packing Company. Home went for sale here 2 years ago on the market, sold for $17 million, and the homeowner said, yeah, $17 million, let's tear down, build our new home. So you see that $17 million lot there. And then if you have your phone or camera with you today, I suggest getting it out. Many people consider this next home to be the most beautiful on the lake. It's a stunning example of Georgian architecture. It was known as Wadsworth Hall when it was built in 1906 for Norman Waite Harris, founder of the Harris Trust and Savings Bank, today BMO Harris Bank. In 1920, it was sold to Walden W. Shaw. He was co-founder of the Yellow Taxi Cab Company in Chicago. A few years later, sold it to his brother-in-law, Daniel F. Peterkin Jr. It stayed in their family for almost the next 8 decades until 1999, when it was bought by an investment advisor named Mr. Richard Driehaus. Mr. Driehaus did a 16-month renovation of this property, painstakingly returning the home to its original glory, and as you can see, he did a very, very good job in doing so. Mr. Driehaus was a very generous man throughout his lifetime, having donated over $95 million to various charities, but sadly in March of 2023, he did pass away here at the lakefront. The family decided they didn't really want to maintain the property, sold it thereafter for a record price in the state of Wisconsin. That home sold for $36 million here at the lakefront. Right next door to them, this brown home with the white trim is known as Flowerside Inn. It was built in the 1920s for Mr. Chapin. He was one of the founders of one of the old New York Stock Exchange brokerage firms back in the day. He also was the one who founded the Water Safety Patrol here at the lakefront, so we'd like to shout him out for doing that as well. You may notice here on the lawns here some little lawn mowers that are going on the grass area there. You know how they have Roombas that you can buy for your house that can mop and vacuum? They have lawn mowers for that too now, if you have the money. So the next home here, nestled back among the trees, is appropriately known as House in the Woods. It was built in 1906 for Mr. A.C. Bartlett. He was a wholesale hardware distributor, founder of what is today known as True Value Hardware. Now, since the contractor, Richard Suter, was busy building the Swift and Harris homes at the same time, special plans were made to complete this home on schedule. He went over to Delavan, Wisconsin, just 10 miles away, and borrowed a 3-ring circus tent from P.T. Barnum's Circus, erected it on site and heated it so that construction could continue through the dead of winter. The home had to be finished on time by that April because it was to be a surprise birthday present for Mrs. Bartlett that spring. Nice birthday present if I say so myself. Looks like also, this is my first time seeing it for the season, is the lovely yacht tied to the pier here. That's known as the Henry Knox. It looks very old, but that is a newer yacht to the lake. It was just built in 2016. Now, it's the first lake yacht of its kind to have a gyroscope in the center of it. So even on the choppiest of days out here, when you might think it's really rocking back and forth, the gyroscope balances it out so you don't feel a single wave as you're cruising along the water. Again, if you have the money, you can do whatever you want. Now, as we've seen many of them today, there are a lot of people that decide to walk this beautiful lake on the interior path. They're probably not trespassing, and they're also not homeowners. There is a public lake path that goes the entire interior perimeter. If you want to do the entire thing, it's about 23 or 24 miles in total length. It takes you anywhere from 8 to 12 hours depending on your pace. I've personally ever done it, but Captain Ray here, he does it once or twice a season. So if you have any questions about doing it or tips, definitely ask him after the trip today. Definitely more popular to do in sections, though, for people. Most popular is from Lake Geneva to Williams Bay is what people like to do. And then also the North Shore usually is a little bit easier than the South Shore. Not as many hills on the North Shore as there are on the South. Past these modern homes on the ridge ahead of us, set up above that flat lawn is another large white home with the red roof and chimneys, also built back in 1881 for Judge Thomas F. Withrow, named for his daughter Bonnie. It's known as Bonnie Bray today. Now in 1897, it was purchased by Martin A. Ryerson. He and his family were in the lumber and steel business. They had the good fortune of being heirs to the only lumber yard that survived the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. The Ryerson family, they were pretty big party hosts in their day in this home, entertaining guests there such as the Ford family, the Firestone family, the Rockefeller family, and even a young Thomas Edison stayed in that home for a few weeks when he came here to visit the States. Now, originally when the Bonnie Bray estate was built back in the 1880s, they had 1,200 feet of lakefront here, a massive parcel of land extending from the home up until where you see this large American flag with that red striped pier canopy. That gray home that looks like it's almost in the water, that used to be the boathouse for the Bonnie Bray estate. But when the property was being subdivided, the new homeowners there decided, yeah, we're not going to tear down the boathouse. We're just going to build onto it so that we're able to just extend onto it, and our home can be so close to the lakefront here. Now, I also mentioned that 1,200 feet of lakefront here. You could buy land in this area in the mid-1800s for a quarter an acre, even right here on the lakefront. Pretty good steal back then. It's gone up a little bit, as you can imagine. When property does sell now, they don't sell it as much for the home. It's really just about how much linear feet of lakefront you have. About a linear foot, just 1 foot of lakefront on this lake, ranges anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000. So if you have 100 feet of lakefront, just your property there, no matter how far it extends, is at least $2.5 to $5 million, depending where it's at on the lake. Now, as we cross from the north to the south shore here, I have a couple of lake facts to share just before I hop up to the upper deck. As near as geologists can tell, the lake was formed about 20,000 years ago as the last glacier was scraping across North America. It's 7.5 miles wide at its longest point from Lake Geneva to Fontana, and then it's a little over 2 miles wide at its widest point from the beachfront in Williams Bay to the Lake Geneva Yacht Club on the south shore. We have a little over 5,400 surface acres on this body of water, so we're the 5th largest lake in the state of Wisconsin by surface acres. We're also the 2nd deepest lake in the state. We reach a maximum depth of about 150 feet, so that's over in Williams Bay. 90% of the lake is over 10 feet deep, and the average depth is about 62 feet. So it is pretty rare that you find many shallow spots out here on the water. Alrighty, I'm going to set the mic down for a few minutes here, grab a sip of water, and transition up to the upper deck. I'll be back on the mic shortly once we get closer to the South Shore. Alrighty, well, we are approaching the back to the South Shore here. Hi to everyone on the upper deck. You can now get a name or a face with the voice that's talking to you, I guess. The body of water we just kind of crossed through there is known as the Narrows. It's the narrowest part of the lake. It's only about half a mile from shore to shore there. You're going to notice on the South Shore here some low-lying property here. Now that is protected from the expanding winter ice by the gates and the outlet located in the city of Lake Geneva. You may have saw them on your walk down to the Riviera. In the wintertime, we do open the gates to lower the lake level about 2 to 3 feet, just so that we don't get ice on the shoreline as much. We don't have any inlets to the lake. We do have one outlet. We feed into the Illinois, Fox, and the Mississippi River. So water from this lake eventually makes its way all the way down to the Mississippi River. It takes about 14 years, I've heard. I don't know how somebody calculated that, but just telling you what I've told or what I've heard. What else here? Oh, we always get good questions about why are the piers numbered. They're numbered for 2 reasons. The first reason they're numbered is for safety. So if we ever have any boating emergencies out here, or if you're ever out here on a private boat and you need assistance, we have the Water Safety Patrol, police boats. We have 2 fire boats as well on the lake. You can just call them up and say, hey, I'm stuck right outside of Pier 694. They'll be able to help you out pretty shortly, hopefully. The second reason they are numbered is for the mailboat, the U.S. mailboat, the Walworth, what we're riding today. We take a trip all the way around the lake, departing at 10 a.m. every day from June 15th to September 15th. It takes about 2.5 hours for us to go all the way around the lake, and we deliver to 60 to 70 homes on a daily basis. We deliver mail and newspapers Monday through Saturday, and only newspapers on Sunday. We do run 7 days a week. Just to give you an example of how it would look, say take Pier 696 here. We go about 2 to 3 feet away from the pier, traveling about 5 to 6 miles an hour past there. You jump out the front window, deliver the mail into the box, and hopefully make it back on board before it is too late. I am proud to say I do hold the record for falling in the water the most time as a mail jumper. In one season, I fell in 33 times, and in my career, 56 times. Captain Ray will vouch for that one. He always gets a good smirk when that happens. Thankfully, if I'm nice enough to him in the morning, he does come loop around and pick me up. So, better for him, though. He'd have to jump and drive himself if I wasn't back on board. So, makes for quite the challenge that way. We're going to be passing by this large grassy area here. And that is known as the 700 Club. That's because all the piers share the address of 700 and the home's the address of 700 South Lakeshore Drive. Now you may notice all the open land here in the subdivision here. That's because they have a provision here that you cannot build any new homes that obstruct any existing homes' views. So that's why you're going to see a new construction home tucked a little bit into the trees a little bit so they don't block any others, but they are able to get their own lake view because they're situated at an angle. Starting with all these green boat canopies here, we're going to be approaching this big brown stone building up on the bluff ahead of us. We're going to be looking at the back of the building as the front of this building faces one of the oldest 18-hole golf courses in the United States. Established in 1895, sitting on 80 carefully manicured acres, it's the oldest golf course in the Midwest, sitting on its original site. And of course, this is the clubhouse of the Lake Geneva Country Club. Now, this is not the original clubhouse. The original was a wooden structure built, and it did burn down in 1915 from a fire, and that's why they used so much stone in the second creation, so they wouldn't have one of those big fires again. The building was built with the front facing the golf course rather than the lake to establish the club's purpose of golf. And then also it is a private country club, only open May through October. It is technically open to the public if you want to become a member. The first step in becoming a member is you have to know one of the existing 220 members and their families. And then after that, you have to be voted on by all of the members. You don't have to get just like a 50% in vote. You have to get a unanimous yes from every single person. If just you get one no, sorry, try again next year. And then of course with that come the fees. I can't tell you exactly what the fees are, but I do have to imagine they're somewhere in the 6 digits for sure. Beautiful golf course as we're cruising by the 18th hole here, the par 3. Now sadly though, in the summer months, you think it would be used a lot better. There's only about 50 to 60 tee times available per week though. So very well maintained, but not very well used by the members. just ahead of us here, you'll see that large blue-gray building sticking out from the shoreline there. That has the distinction of resting on the only island out here on Geneva Lake. Duck Island, as it is known, used to be the summer residence of Mr. Henry Bates and his family. They added these small footpath behind the home. Now, since the golf course does separate the home from the highway, it's quite unlikely the Bates will ever have a front driveway. So by arrangement with the country club, they park their cars back in the club's parking lot and then commute across the 18th fairway by means of golf cart. Golf cart access only to that home.
I'm going to jump in here and point out that is a bald eagle sitting in that tree there at Duck Island. We don't see him here a lot from time to time.
Coming into view here next, we're going to see our next group of homes out here on the tour today. This one's known as the Trinky Estates subdivision. You're going to see their beach area on the shoreline there, the white wooden footbridge that leads to their boat lagoon there. And then coming into view, you're going to see their massive front lawn with the home with the orange roof set way far back there. It wasn't intended on being a big grassy area there in the front of that home. It was actually intended on being an aircraft landing strip right there when they were being built. But sadly, the engineers did not calculate the length of the strip properly, so the first plane that tried to land took off two of the home's chimneys. And then the second one after that landed upside down in the water after missing the landing. Thankfully, there were no deaths reported from the events, but after that it was deemed unsafe for use. I think you guys will get a good kick out of this one. I was on the Lady of the Lake a few years ago doing a tour guide, telling the story just like I just told. And there's a lady in the audience shaking her hand at me rapidly. She's like, I got a story. I'm like, okay, come here, tell your story. She's like, oh yeah, I was on the plane that landed upside down in the water. I'm like, all right, I want to hear this one. So actually how it went down, it was the first date is how it went down. The guy he took his dad's plane, wanted to show her around in the area, and when he went for the landing, not so smooth. Sadly for the guy, he didn't get a second date. I don't know, I mean, if that's how the first one went, how does the second one end up? Can it get much worse? Next group of homes we're passing by here is known as the Lake Geneva Beach Association. Back in the day, it started out as a place for people to camp, but through the years, people have subdivided the property and built more permanent structures here. Notice that long boat slip with all the piers on it. There are a lot more homes than you see slips on the pier there. They do have a pretty long waiting list there at the Beach Association to get onto that pier there. There also are a couple of public piers around the lake where you can put your name on a waiting list to get a slip there. As you can probably imagine, they do have a pretty extensive summerly fee that are attached to them. Also, the waiting lists right now are anywhere from 25 to 30 years, depending on where you are. So some people are putting those waiting lists in their wills as well, I've heard. Coming through the trees here, you're going to notice this mint green home we at the cruise line have nicknamed it Timeless. That's because it has the only working clock tower on a home here on the lake. It does tell the accurate time of 12:07 and also lights up at nighttime so you can see it across the lake. Right next door to them, amongst the trees here, is appropriately known as the Allegheny. It was built in the early 1900s for Louis Edward Myers, founder of the L.E. Myers Electrical Contracting Company back in the day. It's currently owned by the Steiberg family of Racine, Wisconsin. Now, they've thoughtfully put this home into conservancy, which means they are reducing the saleable value of the home, but also preventing any future owners from subdividing that property. And then next door to them, you're going to see a much larger white home built in 1900 for Mr. Tracy Drake. Mr. Drake and his brother John were founders of the Drake Hotel, also the Blackstone Hotel and Theater in Chicago. Now, the family lived here for over 35 years here at the lakefront, but the only part of this estate they built is that center part with the 6 ionic pillars. The wings on either side have been added more recently by the new owners, tripling the home in square footage. Now, 2 summers ago, in the summer of 23, this home did go on the market for a staggering $35 million. Didn't sell for that price in the summer of 23. They took it off the market for the winter, put it back on the market in the summer of 24 for a more modest $25 million. Ended up selling at the end of last August for about $22 million there. The next 20 or so homes are going to be passing by here, all built on a small part of an estate of James Hobart Moore. His estate was known as Laura Moore, named for his wife Laura. He and his brother were business partners and venture capitalists. You might recognize some of the companies they organized back in the day. The Diamond Match Company, the American Tin Plate Company, the American Can Company, the Rock Island Railroad, and most famously the National Biscuit Company, better known today as Nabisco, so you can thank him for Oreo cookies. He built his estate here in the year 1900 for approximately $3.5 million, at the time where the average wage was only a few dollars a week. His estate included 400 acres, more than 30 buildings, including his huge Elizabethan-style mansion. It stood behind the rise where this new home behind Pier 774D now stands today. Now, in addition to the main home, I mentioned there were 30 other buildings on the property. Most notably were 3 chicken houses on the property. When it was being subdivided after he was done with it, those 3 chicken houses were not torn down. They were converted into single-family homes, just to give you a comparison of how big they were.
I still think it's pretty cool if they get their mail by way of the lake. That's cool.
Just after the trees here, coming into view, you're going to see this stately white home with a sloping green roof up on the hill. That was built back in 1894 for the late Charles Wacker. It's known as Fairlawn today. Under Mr. Wacker's guidance, the well-organized redevelopment of the city of Chicago took place after the fire. His plans included the Outer Drive, Union Station, Soldier Field, the Shed Aquarium, and of course also the most confusing road in the city of Chicago, Wacker Drive. Right next door to them is Casa del Sueño, or Dream House. The original estate, known as Galewood, was built in 1894, burned in a fire in 1928. The home we see today was built in 1932. It was built by the Stark family of the Stark Piano Company, but shortly after its completion, after a few years after that, it was sold to Mr. and Mrs. William Bell, formerly of Chicago. They were famous producers of daytime TV dramas and soap operas. 2 of their best include the Emmy Award-winning series The Young and the Restless, also The Bold and the Beautiful. Also on the shoreline there, you might notice that lake yacht that looks like it crashed into shore there. That's known as the SS No-Go. That is currently the guest house for the home there. There's 5 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms inside of that lake yacht.
No, but my arms, I had to adjust my arm.
Sid, from up above, if you can get a good look at the Geneva Inn pier when we go by, make sure the decking is all on it.
Big monstrosity.
Oh, up on the hill here, you're going to see that large light gray or light blue building with all of that white balconies facing the lake. That is a luxurious European-style bed and breakfast known as the Geneva Inn. The Geneva Inn also features an excellent restaurant on the main level, recently known as the Oak and Oars under new ownership currently.
That costs more than
Probably.
Over there with the red canopies, that's known as the Boat House. It's a newer restaurant in the lake here. They also do boat sales and boat services and a boat club there. If you're looking for anywhere to dine during the sunset hour later tonight, I recommend over there, even for just a quick appetizer and cocktail out on the patio. The sunset's directly across the lake from us, so probably about the best view you can get of that on the water. Going to be cruising through Buttons Bay here. Buttons Bay is named for Alexander H. Button. He was a local horticulturist who had a home here for many years. Today, this is the site of the Bigfoot Beach State Park with about a quarter mile of sand beach and also 266 acres of public picnic, camping, and park area that are all owned and operated by the state of Wisconsin. Now you're going to notice here we don't have much to talk about once we get from the beach area to after the point we're going to be approaching now. So a few years ago when I was graduating high school 3 summers ago, going around to all the grad parties up here and started talking with all the parents as you normally do, and one of my buddies, his dad volunteers in the summertime as a park ranger here at the state park. So I'm talking to him like, yeah, I work out on the boats. We have a lull in the tour. Anything you can tell me about that I can tell people just to fill in some time or anything? And what he told me I was pretty baffled by, actually. He told me they do a really good job of this. There's not a single mosquito in the entire state park. They're all married with large families. That's got to be my worst one. I'm sorry.
That's good. I got
You can't see though, this is, especially in June and July on a hot summer day, this by the beach here is filled with boats, sometimes a couple hundred boats on the shoreline here. Really because I mentioned a lot of this water is deep, but you can pull up here almost about 200 feet from the shoreline and it's only about 4 or 5 feet deep with all sandy bottoms there. So super popular for people to do, pull up, drop an anchor, chill there for a few hours. just as we're rounding main tag point here, you're going to notice that white boathouse on the shoreline there. Coming into view, you're going to see that large white home up on the hill there. That was owned for a while by the Canellis family. They were founders and former owners of Andy's Candies, located in Delaware, Wisconsin. Internationally known manufacturers of after-dinner mints and chocolates. Most popular today over at Olive Garden. Behind the gazebo area, that projects out from the shoreline there, is a townhouse development on the shoreline known as Somerset. Dates back to the late 1970s. Before that, it was known as Harrose Hall, a large mansion there, owned by Harry G. Selfridge. He built his estate there in the late 1800s. In the early days, Mr. Selfridge worked at Marshall Field's department store. Worked there for many years, acquired many talents before moving himself across the pond over to London, where he started Selfridge's department stores there. As popular in London as Marshall Field's was in Chicago, except his stores in London are still active today. Behind all these blue canopies, the white stripes, is a condominium development up on the hill. It's known as Vista del Lago, quite appropriately translates to view of the lake. Before that, it was the estate of Mr. George Walker, one of the founders of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His estate was known as Point Comfort when he built it here in the early 1900s. Alrighty, we are now approaching the last home I'll talk about on the tour today, the largest ever built on the lake, 50 rooms and 50,000 square feet inside of this lakeshore mansion. We're still approaching it, but don't worry, when we get there, we'll stop right in front of it. You'll know exactly which one I'm talking about. Began construction back in 1899, completed in 1901, was then known as Younglands, and today is known as Stone Manor. Now, the man named Otto Young was the one that constructed this home. I'll talk about him before I talk about the home itself. Mr. Young, his father died in Germany in the mid-1850s, and he followed his mother to immigrate to the United States, to New York City. He pushed around a pushcart on the sidewalks of New York City, selling costume jewelry. Did that for many years, was pretty successful, made a good amount of fortune for himself. But after his mother's passing in the late 1860s, he moved to Chicago just after the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Many people at that time thought that Chicago would never rebuild after the devastation of the fire. We know it definitely did rebuild today. Much of what he bought back in that area was about 90% of the Chicago loop. So at the time of his death in 1906, a conservative estimate of his fortunes were set at about $25 million. You can now see the home up ahead of us, 7 levels in all, 2 sub-basements, 4 main levels, and a rooftop terrace. Set off by a 250-foot wide veranda. The mansion stretches 174 feet as it faces the lake, and it is 70 feet deep. Exterior walls are dressed Bedford limestone. The floors in the home are hand-laid parquet tile, and the interior walls are Tennessee marble. When completed in 1901, all of the plumbing, doorknobs, and electrical fixtures on the main level were 14-karat gold plated, with matching solid sterling silver on the second and third. Now, originally the main level was the ballroom, complete with a crystal chandelier, huge mirrors, and an ornate pink marble fireplace. He also built himself a hand-carved dining room table that could seat as close as 100 guests. In addition to that were the parlor, library, music room, game room, butler's pantry, and a vast kitchen as well. The second and third levels were the bedrooms and bedroom suites. There were 16 of them. They averaged 20 by 25 feet and all had their own adjoining sitting rooms and bathrooms. The fourth floor, just below the roof line, there's no windows up there. That's because it was designed for recreation. Originally had a gymnasium and an 18-hole miniature golf course on the fourth floor. And then originally the roof was the garden, not just daisies and roses up there. He also put a 35-foot willow tree up there with the idea that the branches would cascade over the right side. It looked pretty, but what they didn't think of is that as trees grow up, yes, the roots do grow down. So in the 70s, when they were pulling that tree out, what did they find? They found a 14-foot hole in the ceiling. How did they fill that in? You can see the guardrail on the right side up there. There's now a 14-foot deep rooftop swimming pool up there. Even the 2-level basement was elaborate, including a 3-lane bowling alley, jewelry vault, huge laundry and drying rooms, and a mammoth coal storage room with a double boiler system. Now, Mr. Young only got to enjoy the home for about 5 years before his death, but it remained in his family until 1939 when his granddaughter presented this home and 8 acres of surrounding land to the local Episcopal Church to be used as a private summer school camp for girls. Unfortunately, they did not have the finances to heat this home during the wintertime and maintain its upkeep, and financial problems have followed the home ever since. In the early 1960s, it was taken over by Walworth County for back taxes. There was a tax auction held right here on the lakeside lawn, bought by a developer that night for just $75,000. Might think you missed out on a deal of a lifetime, but millions and millions have been spent in the restoration of this building. First started out in the early 1970s, the main level got transformed into an elegant French restaurant known as the Stone Manor Inn. After the head chef passed away after about 2 years in business, they couldn't really stay in business much longer after that. After that, in the mid-1970s, a Chicago couple bought it and transformed this into the world's largest Christmas tree museum at that time. That's right, in the summer resort town of Lake Geneva, someone thought that was the grand old idea. They failed after 3 months. They finally got it right, though, in the early 1980s. A different Chicago couple bought it and turned it into 7 luxurious condos. About 5 or 10 years ago, a lady came into town and started buying up all of those condos. Her name is Tina Trahan. She's the ex-wife of the CEO of Starz Cable Network. She currently owns 6 of the 7 condos, waiting to buy that 7th one. Not rushing the owner of it. She's like, whenever you're ready to sell, don't worry, just call my name. I'll be ready to buy it. She's already spent about $15 million into its repair and restoration and is planning on turning it back into a single-family home. They are here a lot more than some of the other Lakeshore residents. They're usually here about 2 or 3 months during the summer, so they do use the property quite well. And with that, that is the largest home ever built on the lake, and the story that goes with it, originally known as Younglands and today known as Stone Manor. With that as well, that's kind of going to be wrapping up my portion of the tour. I'm going to hand the mic back down to Captain Ray. He'll talk about a few of the sites as we're approaching the city of Lake Geneva, and then some safety announcements as we're approaching the Riviera docks. Thank you all so much for coming out today. If you have any questions, I'll be on the pier as you're coming off, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Sid, for a great job with the narration. A couple of the sites as we approach the city, dominating our skyline is the 9-story Geneva Towers built in 1970. It's on the former site of the Hotel Geneva. When the Geneva was built back in 1912, it was Frank Lloyd Wright's largest commission. The brick building where we departed is the Riviera. That was a popular big band destination when it was new back in the 1930s. Wayne King, Artie Shaw, the Dorseys, Frank Sinatra, Louis Armstrong, Glenn Miller, among those performing there. The upper level's been restored to the grandeur of the 1930s. It's used as a civic center. The lower level has shops open during the summer. In just a few minutes, we'll be docking at the Riviera docks. We ask that everyone stays seated throughout the docking process. It is for your safety. If I bump the pier a little harder than I intend, I wouldn't want anyone to be knocked off balance. Check also to make sure that you have everything. We sometimes find purses, cameras, small children, sweaters, jackets, and whatnot that have been left behind. It's difficult to get them back to you once you leave the boat. If you happen to move your chair from its original location, we'd sure appreciate it if you place it back where you found it, as we will be boarding again immediately for our next trip. Sid will be out there on the pier as you're getting off the boat. As he said, if you have any questions or comments for him, or if you want to show him your appreciation in any way for a job well done. We thank you very much for coming. Hope to see you again soon.